Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Mohave County Board of Supervisors to order. It's 9:30 a.m. Is Buster Johnson on the line?
Yes.
And we have all the supervisors here. I have to extend my apologies. I'm going to adjourn this meeting until 10 a.m. There was some information that had gone out to different media outlets and people saying that the meeting started at 10. And I would hate that people would drive all this way only to miss some of the information, the important information that's going to be spread today. So right now, I'm going to adjourn this meeting till 10 a.m. Very good.
I should know what's going on. If you're a fire. That's just one of the many things.
We're getting our picture taken. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. If you'll please rise. Supervisor Watson.
Please bow your head and pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for the opportunity for us to gather and to go over the number of issues that we have on the Colorado River. These items are such an important to this area and leading to the teachings of years ago that we can all give fish to folks to redeem themselves and for refreshment, but we need to teach them how to fish. So with that in mind, let's continue to seek the still waters of peace, and with that, amen.
Amen. Supervisor Moss.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have Supervisor Johnson on the line?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to, ordinarily at this time, we would do the call to public, but since this whole meeting is a call to public, we will get to that and let everyone have their say after we take care of some business. We're here today to pass a resolution. The discussion and the possible action, adoption of Board of Supervisor Resolution number 2014-017, opposing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's decision to cease raising trout at the Willow Beach Hatchery and releasing trout into the Colorado River. Authorize the chairman to sign a letter to the Director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and the Secretary of the Interior with copies to the senators and congressional delegations of Arizona, Nevada, and California. Open discussions with other states, counties, cities, tribal government, and other affected parties, and engage the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in discussions to reestablish the trout program at the Willow Beach Hatchery. This is the wording of the resolution. This is a resolution opposing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's decision to cease raising trout at the Willow Beach Hatchery and releasing trout into the Colorado River. Whereas the Board of Supervisors met in special session this 13th day of February 2014, and whereas the Willow Beach Hatchery was established in April 1959 as a mitigation hatchery as part of the National Fish Hatchery System to compensate for impacts caused by federal water development projects, as well as fulfill tribal trust responsibilities. And whereas the stocking of the Colorado River has contributed to a renowned fishery for trout and largemouth, smallmouth, and striped bass, which feed on the smaller trout, and whereas ceasing to stock a vital part of a cold water ecosystem will have devastating effects on the remainder of the system, and whereas the Arizona Game and Fish Department relies heavily on the National Fish Hatcheries Program, which includes the Willow Beach Hatchery for most of its trout eggs and for all of its Apache trout that the agency uses to stock the state of Arizona's public waters, and whereas in 2010, it was estimated that by 2014, the Lake Mead National Recreation Area would generate around $13 million in user fees. Actual dollars raised have not been provided to date, and whereas the economic benefit of the trout raising and release program at the Willow Beach Hatchery generated a reported $500,000, according to a 2005 United States Fish and Wildlife study, And whereas the economic impact generated from sport fishing with Mohave County was $74.5 million, according to 2001 Arizona Game and Fish Department Economic Impact Study. And whereas the National Park Service recently completed a $25 million renovation of the Willow Beach Landing in 2011, which allows anglers and boaters to enjoy the sport fishing below the Hoover Dam. And whereas the Willow Beach Hatchery has informed Mohave County that the decision to cease raising and releasing trout was made due to the low water level in the river and the cost of repairing and repositioning intake pipes in the Colorado River. And whereas the intentional lowering of the water levels impacting the intake pipes only occurred once over the past 7 years during a consecutive 6-day period due to the harvesting of bony-tailed chubs from the Lake Mohave backwater. And whereas it is our understanding, without significant maintenance activities, the one 24-inch inlet and pipe is still functional and was utilized prior to the drop in water levels. And whereas the failure of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to adequately and appropriately inform and involve the affected state, regional, and local public parties concerning the dire situation existing at the Willow Beach Hatchery precluded involvement and action by local parties and the general public, as well as parties in 3 states, Arizona, California, and Nevada. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors, at their special meeting on Thursday, February 13, 2014, found that the raising of rainbow trout at the Willow Beach Hatchery is a statewide and regional concern that warrants immediate action and attention. Be it further resolved that Mohave County takes the following actions to promote reestablishing the raising and releasing of trout at the Willow Beach Hatchery and promote the continuation of the trout rearing program. 1, send a letter and this resolution opposing the end of its sport fishing stocking efforts to the United States Fish and Wildlife Director and the Secretary of the Interior, with copies to the Senate and congressional delegations for Arizona, Nevada, and California. Open discussions with other states, counties, cities, tribal governments, and other parties affected by the unilateral decision made by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service to cease raising trout. 3, engage the United States Fish and Wildlife Service in discussion to reestablish the trout program at the Willow Beach Hatchery. That is a long resolution, but it's a very important problem. So with that, I'm going to invite Stuart Jacks, our Regional Director from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I believe you're District 2, to the podium and present a presentation.
Good morning, Chairwoman Angus and supervisors from Mohave County. I am honored to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to come and present this information, and also for the opportunity to interact with our stakeholders in this important matter. What I'd like to do is start with just a fairly brief PowerPoint presentation on the situation at Willow Beach, and also to address some of the issues regarding our recently undertaken National Fish Hatchery evaluation and a report that was just released back in November. So I'll go ahead and start with the presentation, if that's all right.
Please do.
So what I would like to do to hopefully clarify some of the information is just to have a few things that I want to touch on. One is to present a little bit of information about the facility, a little bit of discussion about the timeline of the recent events, our current situation, to talk briefly about the National Fish Hatchery Review and the prioritization that's associated with that, and also then to start looking at our next steps. So as you had mentioned, Willow Beach was established in 1959, and since then has been producing rainbow trout, and starting in the 1970s was also involved in threatened and endangered species production and restoration. It's housed there just fairly close to Hoover Dam and receives most of its water and all of its water for trout production from the Colorado River itself through what used to be 2 intake pipes and is now 1, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And we have stocked rainbow trout originally from Lake Powell downstream to Yuma in the Colorado River, and also at one time, like with the Wallapai Indian tribes, but also tribal lands downstream of here. And in recent years, the trout stocking was conducted in the upper part of Lake Mohave in the Willow Beach area itself, and then down below Davis Dam, and then with the tribal waters. So a little bit more information. As we talked about, it started in 1959, stocking rainbow trout in the Colorado River. We also raise razorback sucker and bony-tailed chub, and most of that work is paid for with agreements through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and that's been in place for several years now. Our funds for Willow Beach come from congressional appropriations and allocations. One of the questions that's been asked, I've gotten a lot of emails, and one of the questions that is often asked is, why don't we use some of our license dollars to pay for the trout and the work at the hatchery? But the license sales on the Colorado River go to the state agencies to fund their programs, like for Arizona Game and Fish and for the Nevada Department of Wildlife, and also California Fish and Wildlife Department. And so that's one thing I think that's been an important thing to make sure that we bring up. Some timeline that really got us to this point was and I didn't put this on here, but talking with Mark Olson, our hatchery manager there at Willow Beach, is originally we had two pipelines. That we had a deeper one and a more shallow one. The deeper intake, lower down in the river, the bank was caving in. There was a huge hole large enough for a person to fit through, and so we had to make the decision because of that situation to close the deeper water intake, and that was just done in June. And so since then we have been relying on the more shallow intake. And in August of this past year, there was a large mat of vegetation. I've got a picture of a similar one, but that came in, and we lost several thousand trout at that time. Surprisingly, we didn't lose all of them. It was thanks to some quick action of our hatchery employees to get in there and remove that vegetation. Otherwise, we would have probably lost all of the fish at that time back in August. But then again, in November of this past year, as we were relying on the shallower water intake, the river level went down enough that we were pulling in air in addition to the water, and we did not have enough water in the system to keep the raceways going, to keep the trout alive. And as you probably know, that the trout need, they're very sensitive to those kind of situations. And it happened during work hours, and thanks to the quick actions of the hatchery employees, they were able to stock out several thousand right then that day in the immediate area. But a little over half of the fish were died on that day, and at that time there were no more rainbow trout left in the facility. These are some pictures. This is a picture of the deeper intake, and this is what it looks like with a mat of vegetation. If you can see there, these were pictures that were taken by, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, Bureau of Reclamation divers, and you can see the size of the pipe, but you can also see the vegetation that had come over the top of it. And that is not the picture from what happened in August, but the same type of situation. This is more a picture of the inside of the pipe itself. As you can see, it's starting to crumble. And then also with the pipeline where we start to have these huge holes in it, and what happens is we're sucking in the water. You're also pulling in vegetation. And then this is the shallower intake. As you can see, most of it in this picture is out of the water, but not completely. And these are just some pictures to show the pipeline system, and that was one of the major causes, or the major cause as to why we lost all of the rainbow trout. The reason that this hadn't been fixed is just because of the cost. Back a few years ago, we had done some research into repairing the pipeline system and had some engineering work done, and actually had gone out for bids, and I believe that we provided that to your office to give you some idea of the preliminary work that we had put into it. But just because of the overall cost, we weren't able to implement those, which I'll kind of touch on in just a little bit, but that chronic situation of budget challenges. So moving now to our current situation, there are no rainbow trout going to be brought onto Willow Beach, at least until the pipeline is repaired, because the process to get fish from rainbow trout from egg stage to stockable size is about an 18-month process. And so we can't take the risk that at any time those fish could be lost, and that was our situation in November. Those fish were of catchable size. And so we can't take that kind of risk of bringing the fish on knowing that you could lose them any day. We've done some work, and there are also one of the situations where there are no other rainbow trout immediately available from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so from any of our other facilities. And so that's kind of where we're at now when we're looking at the availability of rainbow trout. I've had some discussions, and I think we can get into it in our next steps, but some discussions with my colleagues from Arizona Game and Fish and some other people about starting to consider some other options that we might want to pursue. Then I'd kind of like to change gears just a little bit, but I think that this fits and is part of the reason that we're at this point is we recently, the Fish and Wildlife Service, starting in the fall of 2012, undertook an evaluation of our entire National Fish Hatchery system, which is 70 hatcheries across the country. And that was having to deal with this chronic hatchery budget challenges nationwide. And not able to keep up with maintenance. We were maintaining huge numbers of vacancies across the program, and so what we were trying to do is take money from other programs to keep the hatchery going, or the hatcheries, not just here in our southwest region. And so a group of people, biologists and upper management within Fish and Wildlife Service, started that evaluation in the fall of 2012, and then had completed their report in March 2013. And then that report was provided to our leadership, and they had some discussions internally, and then that report was released in November of 2013. And that is available to anyone that wants to. We can provide a link to that you can get it electronically. And what that did was, because of this chronic situation with maintenance issues and adequate operation funds, is we're trying to prioritize our work. We had 500 different propagation programs going on in our 70 hatcheries, and we couldn't do everything. And so we did this work to where then we started to develop some priorities. That document is not a decision document. That is out and is available, and so those priorities that are expressed in that hatchery report, and they were put into 5 priorities, that it is not a decision document. And so now is the time when we are going out and getting input from our partners and stakeholders. And so this is a very timely meeting, and I'm really glad you organized this meeting. We've had some discussions with all of our state agencies, with the state fish chiefs and others within the state agencies. We've recently had meetings with the Arizona tribes that we provide fish for. In our southwest region, we provide a lot of fish in New Mexico to tribes, and so 2 weeks ago we had a meeting with New Mexico tribes to solicit their input. And so what we're doing now is, in the next month and a half, is to get that information, all of the information we get, things like the resolution, letters, emails that I get from anglers, whatever I get will be forwarded to our leadership as they make the decision. And so their timeline in this decision process is to make a decision in the spring, sometime April and May, with the expectation that any changes that are made will be implemented in starting on October 1, so the beginning of our fiscal year, so starting on October 1 of 2014. So this is a very important time to get this information. Now, a question that had been asked in these previous discussions was, if we go out and ask this input, do we have the opportunity to change the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's priorities? And our assistant director's response was, I don't know. However, we want to make sure that we provide that information so that when they're making these decisions, that they have a complete picture and a better understanding of the situations that we face. So I wanted to bring that up because of the immediate situation here at Willow Beach that is affecting everyone in the area, but then also how it ties into this overall hatchery evaluation and how we need to move forward. So this is where I hope to be able to clarify and answer any questions that the board would have, but then also if we have time as you determine to have questions maybe from the audience. But what we need to do is look for ways to address our infrastructure issues. These are things that have been chronic and have been going on for a long time. It's surprising that some of this hasn't happened years ago. So that's one of the things that we need to is to address that. We also I hope that we can get information and input for our National Fish Hatchery evaluation. And also I'd like to and this was in a discussion that you and I had on the phone a couple of weeks ago, is to start to look for alternative ways that we can provide rainbow trout in this area and start to think about, we know we have a problem, but instead of just maybe discussing the problem, start to look at some alternative ways. And so I just wanted to provide that quick presentation, and hopefully that clarifies some of it. But that's the end of the presentation, so at this time, if you or other members of the board have questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those. And I have Mark Olson, the hatchery manager, so if it's a hard question, he can answer it because he is a lot smarter than I am and has a lot better information.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming here all the way from Albuquerque. And we appreciate it, and I'm very happy that you've said on the record that this is not a done deal, that people are working together. We know that all the way back to Washington, this is being worked on. There's a lot of concern. People understand, our elected officials from many states understand the importance of not just our fish hatchery issues, but other fish hatchery issues, and what it means to the economy out here in the West. So this whole hearing is for that, for information, for you giving to us information we're going to give to you, questions, and then, of course, the public who have questions because it not only affects their livelihood, but their way of life. So, again, I appreciate it. I was out there at the fish hatchery yesterday, and Tom Frew was nice enough to take my husband and myself out, and I got a lot clearer picture as to the pipe issues, and we were glad to see some of the rumors and stories that we had heard were false, and that we are all open to coming up with maybe a solution outside the box just to save this program and work together for a change. So with that, I'm going to ask the board if they have any questions. And we've also asked our county administrator, who had been up at the meeting several weeks ago. Senator McCain sent a representative down to Bullhead City, and Jack Hakem, the mayor of Bullhead City, and some of his people, and some of the representatives from Mohave County, and I believe Arizona Game and Fish, took a tour of the fish hatchery, and we're lucky enough that our county administrator is also an engineer.
Good.
So I said, take a really good look at those pipes, because we're going to be asking questions. So first I'll open up to the board for any questions.
I just have, I guess, a few brief questions. It's a $2.5 million fix for the pipes. Was that the U.S. Game and Fish Wildlife's estimate as to the corrective costs of this problem?
What we had looked at is an estimate, and I'd seen estimates that have ranged from close to $3 million to up to $8 million, depending on exactly what is the overall project. I think if you were trying to look at, the lower end of that, that would be to make sure you could get water in, but with the things that are associated with it, it could fluctuate in that.
How are these estimates prepared?
We had our own, and Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we had, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a team of engineers, and we brought them out onto the facility, and with our own staff of looking at that and trying to make some assessments and have some of that information that was also provided by the Bureau of Reclamation with their divers with information, with pictures and things like that to make that kind of an estimate. So Mark, was there anything else, Mark, to help provide that complete for the estimates of our pipeline repair?
The estimates just for the pipeline repairs they went out for public bid. And those are the estimates that came back, I think 1.3 to 2.5 million.
And if you couldn't hear, what we had done is we had put that out for public bid, if some people in the audience couldn't hear Mark's response. And so the bids came in from that 2.5 million to 3 million.
Just to make sure I'm clear, because I thought the gentleman said it was 1.3 to 2.5 was for the pipeline repair.
Those were on just the pipeline bids, but none of those bids were actually analyzed by engineering to see if they met the scope of works because our budget was way below that.
Why don't you come up and say?
Mark, that way we can
I
make sure that it's
want to
big.
pinpoint, if we can, the cost to correct the problem and the data that backs up that estimated cost to correct the problem. And then I have a couple more questions
Okay.
if the chairman will bear with me.
Absolutely. The contracting public bids that came in, they range from 1.3 to 2.5 million dollars. However, they were never analyzed by our engineering in Albuquerque because our funding was so short of that dollar amount that the project just was not completed.
When it comes to those bids, approximately how many bids did you receive?
I saw 3. I don't know what they received, but I only saw 3, and I provided them, I believe, to Mohave County.
That's my next question. Have they been provided in Mohave County for us
We're
to
going to
look at?
discuss that.
Excellent. When it comes to the actual, so the resolution said it was a $2.5 million fix for the pipeline, if by memory anyway. That would actually be the high end, depending on which the bids are more accurate. Am I interpreting that correctly?
It would, and your engineer on your staff maybe could help clarify that, but we didn't analyze their bids, so we don't know for sure. We just had the preliminary bids, but there had been no analysis of the bids itself to make sure that it met and was doing what it was expected to do.
And the reason I'm going down this path is, to some degree, is I get the impression by some of the word choice that there may be multiple issues at the hatchery, and some people are distinguishing the cost to repair the pipeline versus some other issue. Am I getting the right assumption from some of the statements, or are we only looking at the pipeline costs?
I'll start with that, because what we were looking at is first and foremost is we have to make sure we get water coming into, but dealing with, for instance, quagga mussel and trying to work on systems that help prevent that so we can have better maintenance of the facility and better operation. That's one of the challenges. So when you're looking at, if you're piecing this out, the pipeline is one part of it, but when you're looking at a complete repair, it needs to entail more than that. And I don't know if Mark, if you want to.
Yes, as everyone knows, the hatchery was built in 1959, and a lot of the infrastructure is still original, and it's failing. I mean, we have 2 banks of raceways that have not been replaced, and 2 have. And unfortunately, the upper 2 raceways where the water flows through first have not been repaired, and they're crumbling. And it's on and on. I mean, the pipelines are just one aspect of the whole project.
And that's what I'm getting at, to make sure, because if that pipeline was repaired as opposed to raceway repair, how long have those raceways been out of service?
Since November.
Okay, so the raceways are also a recent break.
The raceways are still operational, but their ability to be operational is starting to come into question because they're deteriorating.
Okay.
Because that's more of the situation. So they're operational at this time, but it's the hatchery itself is dealing with this maintenance issue overall.
Okay, so we have the actual pipeline repair, which is 1.3 to 2.5 million, and there's a potential need for other repairs at an unknown cost to the raceways. Is that defining the problem?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure we've defined the scope of the problem here.
And what has happened is sometimes when you get into some of these projects, other things come up, but you're correct on that, your question.
I'm going to ask you a hypothetical, which I know is not probably something you're going to want to answer, but it occurs to me that there are engineering departments and public work departments from multiple jurisdictions, county, municipal, on both sides of the river, from 3 different states, not to mention Indian tribes and other interested persons who might have a vested interest in getting that pipeline repaired. Would there be, from a hypothetical viewpoint, any problem with your agency to allowing the engineering and public work departments in from Mohave County, Bullhead City, other entities to see what they could do vis-a-vis pipeline and potential raceway repair?
No, I think that that's where, hypothetically, I don't see any issue with that. I think we'll have to remember that when we're doing with the work from the human health and safety, but when you're looking at the ability to bring in other people, I think that that's something we would definitely want to consider. And that's something that I've had some discussions with others about that have said that potentially they could help in that side of things. Sometimes they may not be able to have funding, but might be able to provide staff time to help on get it through some of these situations.
Well, I will tell you that at least Mohave County, Arizona, over the last year or so has been very open to partnerships between public sector and other government entities to cost-effectively solve some problems, and this seems like a problem that needs to be solved.
And I think that would be potentially would be a wonderful way to start to address this.
Okay.
Very good.
And Madam Chair, I think I've exhausted all my
Thank you.
questions and your patience.
I think we got some good answers and some good future ideas to get this done. How about Supervisor Johnson? Is there anything you'd like to say?
Sure, Madam Chair. Mr. Jacks, what effect will this closure have on commitments made for the LCR MSCP, the Lower Colorado River multi-species?
Because at Willow Beach, we have two water supplies, one for the rainbow trout, which is the Colorado River water. The razorback sucker and bonytail that we have on station, their water supply is through a well, and so that well system has remained consistent in being able to provide the necessary water. So there shouldn't be any issue with Willow Beach being able to meet the production commitments for the MSCP program.
Okay, I guess maybe I wasn't clear on that. I understand you're going to be able to meet the production requirements, but now if the trout are removed, isn't that going to leave the endangered species for feeder fish for the bass?
Exactly.
And that's an important point and a question that's been raised a lot, and that the endangered fish that we stock out in Lake Mohave and in other places downstream, they have been available, and that's been one of the challenges, is working with the predation of other fish that are out there. So that's already happening. How it's affected by the loss of rainbow trout also being in the system is yet unknown, but it's still to be determined as to how much of an impact that change is going to be, but there would be some kind of an impact for sure.
So will that be taken into consideration? Because besides the sport fishing aspect, if we just do away with the trout and then you're raising bony-tailed shub and throwing it back in and the bass are eating it, kind of ruins the millions of dollars we've got tied up in the Lower Colorado River multi-species program, won't it?
That's a huge challenge, and not just in Lake Mohave, but in other places in the Colorado River and in other places across the country, is working with the ecological challenges of having lots of other fish that are competing with the threatened and endangered fish. So that's a challenge that through the MSCP program of looking at alternative ways or the best ways to manage those endangered fish, but there is by no means a solution at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Jacks. That's all I have right now, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Supervisor Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. Angus, I just wanted to make sure that, and Supervisor Johnson did an excellent job of pointing out the entire complexity of this issue. Having been a striper fisher myself, I really appreciate the trout having been there, but with the trout being removed, the ecosystem certainly going to be involved in threatening the bony-tailed chub and the razorback sucker, and it seems to me a tremendous waste of money to see this whole project be in jeopardy because of the inability of us to be producing trout. So that was very well outlined by Supervisor Johnson, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And I know that's a huge issue that we're facing.
Okay, is that all? Okay, Supervisor Brotherton? Okay, at this time, I've asked our County Administrator, Mike Hendricks, to just sort of make a general statement, and because he has been up there and he has seen the pipes, he is more than prepared to ask some more technical questions, I believe, so.
If they're too technical, this is going to be
Okay.
a real challenge for someone like me.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I do appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much, and all the rest of the audience. It's quite an honor to be in front of all this participation. My questions actually stem from articles that I've been able to gather and reports from the Fish and Wildlife Service and Arizona Game and Fish, and also from our meeting with Mark Olson up there at the hatchery itself. So I tried to get my facts together as much as possible, and if I do have some errors in them, I apologize, and you're welcome to correct me. But I believe that the two major points that were mentioned for the closure of the hatchery was economics and infrastructure. And I'd like to try to address both of those issues. According to the Fish and Wildlife Service, or your own study in 2004, for every dollar that you spent on the rainbow trout budget, it created $32.20 of retail sales and $36.88 of net economic value associated with these expenditures, and that's a considerable amount. That's quite a return on investment. Additionally, in accordance with the Arizona Game and Fish study in 2001 that was performed by Arizona State University, they said the direct impact of fishing expenditures in Mohave County totaled over $74 million and supported 1,682 full-time jobs. Further, in 2005, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service put forth a statement that taxes alone created by the planting of trout along the Colorado River generated nearly $500,000 in taxes, which more than paid for the trout planting program. And ironically today, as reported by the Las Vegas Review-Journal, even though Fish and Wildlife Service is citing financial shortfalls as a driving force behind the Willow Beach trout hatchery closure, a report in 2011 by the Fish and Wildlife Service touted the economic value of its fisheries program, stating the fisheries injected more than $3.6 billion into the U.S. economy annually. And that's incredible. Further, and to put this into perspective, a company with $3.6 million in annual profits would rank roughly 41 on the Fortune 500 list of America's most profitable corporations. You know, in looking at this, it doesn't make sense abandoning a 50-year-old trout stocking federal program that not only appears to have paid for itself, but also generates such a tremendous large investment in local economies doesn't add up. You know, also, and I don't know if this is totally true, but I understood some of the problems associated with the immediate closure of the hatchery were due to this sequestering. And, you know, we had questions in Arizona why some of our park areas were being closed and blamed on the sequestering when they were actually money generators. And I know Fish and Wildlife Service isn't the National Park Service, but if the fish hatchery was an economic boon, both in sales tax and in revenue generation, like what I believe you all have touted that it is, it doesn't make sense to close it. Also, it seems unfair to me that the federal government would abruptly close the 52-year-old Willow Beach stocking program that is a revenue and economic generator in the light that our river communities have actually built a lot of their economy around this 52-year-old program. And to have it pulled out from under our cities along the river and our businesses along the river doesn't seem like it's prudent. So one of the questions I have, I know you've said that you've been meeting with different things, but the federal government has a very rigid public participation process to include environmental assessments. And what was mentioned by Supervisor Johnson and Supervisor Watson is, you know, this could have severe, the closing of the hatcheries could have severe impact on our ecosystem. And why is this hatchery been allowed to abruptly close, and why aren't we following that public participation process?
So, starting with the information that you presented from the economic side of it, all of that information is correct, and that has been a major part of the program itself. One of the challenges from that is that the economic benefits don't return the funding back to the program, so we're still faced with the budgets that we have. Then addressing your question about the process, because of the hatchery evaluation and making those decisions, that's based upon internal budget priority setting, and so it's my understanding that because that's that internal process, that there was not be an environmental impact statement. But I know that that's a question that has been asked by others.
And I appreciate that response, but to build on that, from what I gathered, the main reason for the closure of the hatchery is a $2.5 million estimated capital investment required to bring the hatchery up to par, and that estimate was based on plans that were presented and actually quoted in 2012, which wasn't directly related to this particular closure. Just prior to our January 23rd meeting at the hatchery, I asked whether or not the hatchery could easily and quickly be made functional using the existing 25-inch Techite pipe. And a couple of things that Mr. Olson and I discussed and I understood from him was that the single 25-inch Techite pipe wouldn't fully support the trout production that was necessary, and that the inlet pipe would have to be maintained every 2 weeks, I believe is what you said, to prevent it from clogging due to weeds. And further, the existing water inlet is accessible to low flows levels in the water, and what had to be done is construct a $2.5 million repair, or otherwise he couldn't guarantee that the fish wouldn't have another die-off. And since there was only $400,000 available in the budget, like what you mentioned, when proposals were gained, they weren't even reviewed for accuracy because you didn't have the budget for that. I'd like to address regarding the sufficiency of the existing Techite pipe. It appears the trout hatchery operated with only one pipe until the artificial lowering of the water levels in Lake Mohave starved the trout production water pumps and killed the fish in late November. Additionally, in reviewing the Willow Beach monthly reports for 2013, I found no significant discrepancy in the amount of trouts being stocked during the year prior to the shutdown in November. So the single pipe appeared to be sufficient, at least for the water flow. Looking into the claim, the inlet would need to be maintained every couple weeks to prevent the clogging due to the weeds. In your November 25th news release, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service stated that problems with the pump due to clogging of the pipeline vegetation had only occurred once during the whole year. Addressing the low water levels, I probably have this wrong because it's kind of odd, but it's my understanding the low water levels which starved the inlet pipe to the trout hatchery in November occurred during a 6-day period and constituted an event which Mr. Olson said he hadn't seen for the 7 years that he had been there, and probably a lot longer. So it was an event. The lower water levels were artificially created, and this is a story that we received, so I'm not sure of the accuracy. But due to a request made by the Fish and Wildlife Service to the Bureau of Reclamation to lower the water levels so the endangered razorback suckers or bony-tailed chub or both could be easily harvested out of the backwaters of Lake Mohave. And apparently either no one at the trout hatchery or no one was watching or monitoring the water levels, and you found out just by your regular shifts that you'd starved the inlets, and the pumps were dry and they weren't able to feed the races. So regarding the estimated $2.5 million repair, I was able to obtain, like you said, from the Fish and Wildlife Service a set of plans and quotes for the work. The quotes were received by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the pipeline replacement at the hatchery in late 2012 to remove the damaged pipe and extend the inlet about 200 feet using about a 36-inch Techite pipe. Cost for the pipe replacement was estimated at, like I said, $2.5 million, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service only had a $400,000 budget. There was no, and my staff tried to research this, but there was no formal solicitation process, and only 3 quotes were solicited and obtained directly from vendors, and the quotes, like you said, were $2.4 million to $1.37 million. However, the quotes included big-ticket items such as the removal of the damaged pipe, which I'm not sure is essential or a practice that's necessary, the excavation of the fill material around the pump house, and supplying the trout hatchery with water during construction, which added up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of which may not be necessary due to today's conditions. One of the conditions that isn't obviously necessary today is a $314,000 quote by one of the vendors to supply water for the trout hatchery because it's not functional currently. Additionally, in reviewing the construction drawings, I didn't see that there was a significant increase achieved, at least on those construction drawings, by the replacement of the inlet. And one of my questions to Mark was, could the trout hatchery have continued to be operational with the one Techite pipe? And that's a question I still have, because I believe, as far as what I could find, you know, it was functional up until November, and the one event that is prohibiting you all from raising the trout eggs occurred once in 7 years, and maybe once in a lot longer than that. Anyway.
So I'll let Mark answer part of that. Part of the changes in water levels, in fact, I was speaking with people from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation yesterday, and he had provided me some flows over the past couple of years, and we had had lower flows than we had in the fall of 2013, back in 2000, I believe it was 2011, but at that time we were still had the ability to rely on that deeper intake, and so the low water that we saw in November was not the lowest water we'd ever seen, but because of the reliance on the shallower one is what kind of caused that problem. But the ability to rely on one pipe, I don't know if Mark has a response on that one.
Well, to start, I guess, in June of 2013 is when the second pipeline, the compromised pipeline, was shut down. So from June 2013 to August 2013, we were functioning. It only took 2 months, and we had a failure. We had a weed cloggage in the single pipe. So we operated for 2 months. And during those 2 months, we were ramping down production some because of budget constraints. So we didn't have a full hatchery. Typically, we have 250,000 trout on hand. I think we only had 100,000 trout on hand at that time. Had we had a full boat, we would have lost everything with that reduced water flow. And we could not even sustain that with that one pipeline. So I guess
So for full production, we'd need 2?
full production, we need 2 pipelines.
Okay, and I appreciate you for clarifying that. It appeared that, like I said, from your own hatchery reports, that you were consistent throughout the year on how much per month you were stocking. In light of
Can I address that also, sir?
and the other thing that I was a little confused about is which inlet was actually deeper, because on the construction plans it wasn't clear. It looked like the Techite pipe, the existing inlet, was actually further out in the river. But
Further out in the river doesn't mean deeper. Deeper is in the sump area where the actual water is pulled up by the pumps. So the inlet pipe, if you have a wall, an inlet pipe is here from the river, and the other one is here. So it's lower in the water column. That's the one that was shut down, the one that was lower in the water column.
And thanks for clarifying that. And I didn't mean to cut you off before you wanted to say something else.
Oh, yeah, you were saying in the monthly reports that our trout production, our trout stockings did not taper off. They did not. We always had a 1-year production on hand, and because we stock fish every week of the year, so I always had to have 1 year's production on hand, and then the next year is coming on. And so we were backing off on total numbers, anticipating some budget cuts, because keeping water flowing and feeding fish is very expensive. So yeah, we didn't cut down on stocking yet at that point. we didn't cut down on stocking until it all ended.
Until November.
Yeah.
And just one other question I have. 2012 plans were for refurbishing the entire piping system. I didn't, and was used as justification for shutting down the pipe, shutting down the trout hatchery. I wonder if, I believe that the trout hatchery could be functioning with one pipe if the water levels were monitoring. But my question would be, you talked about clogging of the inlet. Were any other less expensive fixes evaluated or even considered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to get that operational?
I'm not sure what all different solutions to had that had been, and that's where I think we need to, looking at what we're going to be doing from here on, is looking at what are those different alternatives that we can consider. I don't know, Mark, if you have. I'm not sure what alternatives, because once we started getting into our the price cost estimates for the repair project, we recognized that we just didn't have the maintenance funds to be able to address it, and so that's when we made the decision not to move forward with it. So I think there could be the potential to investigate other alternatives.
And just looking at your plans and eliminating some of the costly items that may or may not be required, such as the removal of the pipe or the excavation of the field if the pipe's not removed, or the watering of the races for the trouts, it almost brings your unofficial solicitation down to levels that you had funding for. Anyway, I've used up quite a bit of time. I know there's a lot of people to talk. I've talked about my two items that I wanted to have you all address. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Those
you,
are
Mike.
important points.
Thank you very much, Mike. And
Madam Chair, may I ask a question of the county administrator?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to make sure I have this, the last comment that you made clear, Mike. The problem could be solved for, if I'm interpreting your statement, for a lot less money, maybe within the budget the Fish and Wildlife has, if we were to more narrowly tailor the solution to make it functional, but not make it perfect. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Madam Chairman, Supervisor Moss, I believe when the Fish and Wildlife Service said that they didn't even evaluate the bids, and the bids were for a different solution than what we're experiencing a problem for today, other engineering solutions haven't been explored. So I would say there's a great possibility that a less expensive solution could be developed to make this hatchery functional. And it probably, if I was going to make a recommendation to the Fish and Wildlife Service, I believe, and to everybody, I believe that we need to explore those options.
Thank you.
thank you. Being not technical and hearing all of this, what I hear and what I think that the public missed, the piece of the puzzle, is that at some point, U.S. Fish and Wildlife let it be known that they wanted to dwindle down the trout fishing stocking program. So as far as you know, what is the timeline on that? So, because we can be speaking and saying that these are cheaper fixes, but if they want to get rid of it altogether, we're just, spinning our wheels here. As far as you know, what is the policy on this particular hatchery?
So as that stands, we would still, there's been no decision to do away with rainbow trout stocking at Willow Beach or other facilities where we raise trout or other sport fish, because we have warm water sport fish that are produced in other facilities. However, back before the beginning of fiscal year 13, which started on October of 2012, we had lowered budgets, so we had to reduce production costs in different places. And one of the decisions that was made at that time was to lower the production of rainbow trout at Willow Beach. Not to do away with it, but to lower production to just come within our means. We had to make production cuts at some of our warm water sport fish facilities as well. The work that we do at Willow Beach with bony tail and razorback sucker is paid for with primarily with an agreement with us and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So we had to make some decisions with the funds that we had available, and that's then when we made that. It was prior to the beginning of our fiscal year 2013. And so we were reducing production, but not doing away with it.
Very good. Before I have other people who have signed up, we have a lot of people, a lot of representatives from government agencies here. I just want to reiterate that you have said that the Fish and Wildlife Service is open for discussion, ideas of how to have this program continue. And with
Yes.
that, we could go on, with that statement, we can go on and talk about maybe some other ideas that we can come up with.
That's correct.
Very good. We might call you back later. I know some people in the audience may have questions for you. Would you be amenable to answering those questions if they're asked from the public?
Yes, would you like me to stay up here or sit down, or?
I don't know. Why don't you sit at, yeah, absolutely. You're invited up here if
Yeah.
you want to.
All right, yes.
I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but I'm sure people do have some questions. And with that, because you brought up Arizona Game and Fish, I know we have Chris Cantrell, who's the head of the hatchery program for the Arizona Game and Fish.
Madam Chair, Board of Supervisors, thanks for having me come today. My name is Chris Cantrell. I'm the Chief of Fisheries for Arizona Game and Fish Department. Recreational fishing is the heart and soul of the Arizona Game and Fish Department. 55% of our customers only fish in the state, and it provides a big business to us. Willow Beach and below Davis Dam are two very important areas to recreational fishing in Arizona. We've built our hatchery systems in concert with the National Fish Hatchery System. 97% of our hatchery systems are reliant upon the National Fish Hatchery Systems. Stuart, we've been working together. I'm fairly recent new Chief of Fisheries. Stuart's recent and new to his position as well. And we've been working and having lots of conversations on how we can work together into the future and begin re-engaging on the communication that I think we've lost over the years. Unfortunately, this loss of the fishery at Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery was a decision based on an issue that occurred, but lacked the communication from the states. And we are reacting to that at this time. As I stated, Willow Beach and below Davis Dam are two very important areas. Currently, our contingency plans for the future is we are working towards, we're working on communication with the Fish and Wildlife Service to work on what those actions were that Stuart had made clear, is that looking for ways to address the pipeline issue at Willow Beach. And we'll be working with him, and we can help provide staff and our hatchery staff as well as our engineers to come out and look at some of the areas with him and help him along with that issue. As well as we are in discussions about creating some short-term fixes for continuing stocking in those places, because we understand that it will be an economic impact to Arizona Game and Fish Department. We know it's a much larger economic impact to Mohave County, and we are going to do everything we can to assist Mohave County and the anglers in these areas and try to meet their needs. We've had a lot of questions over the last few months about what about bringing trout in from other areas. Unfortunately, those trout, we plan 2-3 years in advance. Those trout are slated for other areas in the state. If we were to stock 120,000 trout into those two areas, which I believe is what historically was stocked in those areas, there would be major economic impacts to other counties in the state because of that, because those fish would be coming from those areas. From an overall financial standpoint, fisheries is really maxed to capacity. However, we are looking within our current budgets to see if there's an opportunity to provide funding to purchase trout. A lot of times buying trout is cheaper than raising trout. And that's an option that I think that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and the state of Nevada should work together on to see if we can create some short-term fixes. But I know there's a lot of folks that are here today, but Game and Fish is concerned with the issue. It is on our radar, and we are working diligently to try to work with the service and with the communities to resolve these issues.
Is there any kind of timeline to this, or do you have a goal date?
Well, we don't have compliance for the Arizona Game and Fish Department or for, I believe, I don't want to speak for Nevada, somebody may be here from Nevada Fish and Wildlife to stock the areas. And unfortunately, we do have a compliance that needs to be conducted in order for us to, it's a federal waterway and we don't have the authority to stock at this point. So we have to work through some of those issues before, but we don't have, that has already started. We are already working, and we are looking within the budgets currently to see, but this would be a partnership. Unfortunately, we look at it as a $250,000 a year trout stocking program in those two areas. And that's a big budget impact to us, and we need partnerships in order to fully mitigate the loss of those fisheries. And like I said, we built that in concert with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we hope that they can continue to meet that service because that was part of the overall fishing opportunity for the state that we've built for a long-term success.
So you said that it's a $250,000 budget item to keep this program going.
That is to purchase 150,000 trout at $4.50 a pound, which is what our vendors out of Colorado and other places that we utilize to stock our community programs, where we purchase trout from other places. We even have vendors in the state, such as off the Blue River. There's a hatchery there as well. That's part of our vendors. And it's about $4.50 a pound to stock trout. And they would have to transport them to the area. So.
But that's just the cost of the trout, but the real cost of the personnel, I mean, the hatchery's open anyway for the endangered species program. So you have that cost and personnel cost, and is there any other cost? I'm trying to get a real number.
Well, if we were to contract directly with vendors, it would be about $4.50 a pound, maybe no more than probably $5 a pound, depending on the vendor, to transport them and stock them. And that creates their personnel and everything else. But there is compliance needs that are important that we are trying to obtain right now. And then we, like I said, we are working with Nevada, and we're in recent conversations with the service to see if there is funding available to do this, because this is a big economic impact to us as well. And we're trying to work together with our partners to meet that.
I'm very happy to hear that. And like you heard earlier, we are open if you guys need help from us, and I'm sure some of the other agencies and states involved would be more than happy to help. But thank you. Did you want to say something?
Yes, I would. Yes, I feel like that since the U.S. Fish and Wildlife are funding the endangered species, have we factored in the cost in losing so many of these endangered species because of the elimination of the trout? Because to get a real cost, that needs to be factored in also.
Excellent point. I don't believe that I'm not sure if that service has factored that in yet. I know we actually have not been conducting the multi-state conservation program, so I feel a little inadequate to answer that question.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of things that, and ideas that will come in if we're getting comments and things from the other states and the other agencies. So I'm very happy also to hear that we're open to comments and all of these ideas, and maybe together we can work together and remedy this problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Moss?
Stuart, if I could, did I get your name correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. I thought I heard earlier in the presentation, or maybe I read it, that this pipeline, that if we were to be repaired, would have a $300,000 a year maintenance cost. Is my memory correct, or am I mistaken on that?
I'm not sure, Mark, can you, I don't know exactly what the annual maintenance for the pipeline itself, it may not be that high, but I'm not sure if there's, oh, there's Mark, good.
That number's floating in my...
I don't have any numbers for that, and I don't know where that information came from.
All right, it's, well, you never know with a politician, I may have just made it up. Question for you, another question for you, as I heard that the budget was $400,000 for the repair, and since your bids came at 1.3 million to 2.5, you just dropped it. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So if the Arizona Game and Fish is saying that they could stock it, and it would include the fish and transportation, et cetera, at $250 for the 120,000 or so fish you're looking for, and your repair budget is $400,000. Doesn't that solve the problem for at least 1 year with $150,000 worth of savings?
That $400,000 was deferred maintenance money, and that was in 2012. That no longer exists.
Okay, so that number, that dollars was 2012, it's vanished, it's up in
It's
the air,
been
it's
used at
gone.
other facilities.
Okay.
Yeah, we use, those are annual deferred maintenance funds that we have to use every year.
Okay. So what's the, so this is one of those programs, if you don't spend it, you lose it type of thing?
With our dollars now, whenever it comes
Yeah.
to the maintenance projects, it doesn't have to be spent within a year. It has to, the project has to be started, and so you have to use it or it gets used somewhere else.
Is there a annual cost that your organization has put together to determine how much it costs you to operate the trout portion of this hatchery?
We have an annual allocation, and it's varied from 1 year to the next, but that includes our portion of the work that's done with the razorback and bonytail, in addition into the trout production. So it's part of the overall budget that's allocated to Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery. So they get an annual allocation for all aspects of it, which means the salaries, the water use, utilities, maintenance, fuel, and operation of both sides of it.
Yeah. Now, make sure I'm clear here. There's an annual allocation, but it's for all three species, trout, the chubs, and the suckers. And that comes, but you haven't broken it down by just the trout as compared to the other two?
We could start to separate, you can't completely separate all of it, but you can give an estimate of what portion is spent on the trout production side versus what part is spent on the native fish side.
Well, it occurs to me the state of Arizona has given a number. And so if your organization had a number, it might be that your organization saves money if they allowed the state of Arizona to run the program. So I'm just throwing that out there. That should be a subject of discussion very soon, I would hope.
Okay, we need to kind of move along. There's a lot of people who want to speak, but I know that County Administrator has a quick question.
Just one clarification from Game and Fish, because words are important. When you say compliance needs, is that permits from the federal government?
That is correct.
So if you had,
State and federal government
you're looking
compliance.
for tremendous cooperation from the federal government, and that's still outstanding?
That is correct. We're currently preparing our permit, our coordination and communication with our compliance documentation that would be turned over to our wildlife sport fish restoration dollars that come in. They come through the federal government, through the Fish and Wildlife Service. We provide that to them. They look to the Endangered Species Office to provide comment to offset any impacts that occur to endangered species or other species that are of concern there for the stocking program, and then we look to offset those impacts and then move forward with the ability to stock. That's still, even with the ability, the budgets are very, very tight, and so that's really where we need to work as a partnership to see if we can't meet those needs.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chairman.
So it comes down to money, like everything, and so we have to find a way, and we have to find where to get this money from.
Correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could, I'm imposing upon her patience. The $300,000 maintenance quote comes from a memorandum that Nick Hunt put together on January 29th, 2014, which is included as part of our materials. And I'll give my copy to Stuart so he can have that. It's on the top sentence of the second page, and that's where that number was drawn from.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much. And you
you.
will be amenable to take questions too if asked from the public?
Yes.
Thank you. You can come up here if you want to. You want to feel? Yeah, come on up. All right. At this time, I'm going to ask Penny Pugh, who is our representative from Congressman Paul Gosar's office, who is our congressman in this district. I know she has a statement.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board and staff. I appreciate you taking the time to hold this hearing. It's very well attended. Dr. Gosar sends his warm regrets, and unfortunately, he's on medical leave and is going to have much-needed hip surgery tomorrow. So he did ask me to share with you some of his thoughts and remarks on this. And I'm going to read it. I appreciate you all taking time out of your day to attend this important meeting. I am deeply troubled by the Fish and Wildlife Service decision to discontinue the rainbow trout stocking program at Willow Beach. For over 50 years, the Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery has successfully raised and planted rainbow trout in the lower Colorado River. The arbitrary and misguided decision to continue this important program will have significant consequences for local communities along the river, as well as sportsmen and anglers throughout the nation. The Arizona Game and Fish Department has estimated that $7.5 to $12 million flow into the Willow Beach region annually as a result of the economic activity associated with the rainbow trout and striped bass anglers. A report done by Arizona State University found that more than 250,000 fishermen visit Arizona each year and spend more than $800 million on sporting goods and other tourist expenses. Terminating the annual production of 150,000 rainbow trout at the Willow Beach Hatchery will stifle Arizona's multi-million-dollar fishing industry, as well as cause considerable harm to small businesses, local governments, and our citizens who depend on the financial benefits associated with sports fishing. By the Fish and Wildlife's own estimates, the National Fish Hatchery System returns $28 to the economy for every dollar spent. That's an excellent return on our investment, and while the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is looking at closing hatcheries throughout the nation, there is plenty of tax dollars being wasted elsewhere in our federal budget that we can reprioritize to fund these important economic engines. Ironically, the Willow Beach Hatchery will not be closing with the termination of the trout stocking program, even though the sole reason the hatchery was created in the first place was to produce rainbow trout for the sport fishing community. Rather than raising and planting rainbow trout that drive tourism and yield economic growth, the Fish and Wildlife Service has instructed the hatchery to focus on producing suckers and other fish that don't attract anglers or benefit our economy. I commend the Mohave County Board of Supervisors for recognizing the danger of this short-sighted decision and continuing to spread awareness. I continue to monitor this situation closely, and Monday had staff from his DC office participate in an important conference call with other Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico state wildlife authorities on the ground to discuss this very topic. Additionally, we are in the process of crafting a bipartisan bicameral letter that will be delivered to Interior Secretary Jewell in the very near future. Rest assured that this issue is not over, and I will continue to fight for jobs, our local economy, and most importantly, our families who are operating on slim margins and can't afford this costly bureaucratic decision. May God bless America and the great state of Arizona.
Thank you very much. And please send our regards for a quick recovery to the congressman.
I will.
We need him back. Thank him for all he does for
All right,
us.
and we stand ready to serve. I've talked to Stuart, and hopefully we can come to a quick resolution on this.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Penny. Okay, I believe that Keith Hughes from Congressman Joe Heck's office is here. And thank you very much for coming.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and the board. I apologize for being a little bit late. On the other hand, all the folks over at the city offices send their regards. They're doing just fine. I came down here today to, in representing Congressman Heck, to say the same thing that Ms. Pugh just said. I was a party to that the conference call earlier this week, as was one of our staffers in Washington as well. There is a draft letter that is circulating now. It probably is ready for signature by now, but the offices, due to the snowstorm, the offices at the Capitol are all closed today. So I would expect tomorrow or Monday that letter will be completed. It's asking for a couple of specific things. It asks for an understanding of Fish and Wildlife Service's methodology in gauging the economic impact to both Arizona and Nevada. It also asks that the Fish and Wildlife Service provide a plan to mitigate those negative economic impacts. And it also asks for a delay until some of these issues can be answered to the satisfaction of the states and municipalities that are involved. Beyond that, I don't have anything else to add. If I was in Laughlin, I would have had a prepared statement.
Well, we thank you very much, and we thank Congressman Heck. And we know that a lot of people, we know our Senator John McCain is working hard, and they're working back. I know we don't hear about it, and one of the purposes for this hearing is to let them know that we support them, that we're here to help, that this is an important program, and we're just going to keep pressuring and keep on because it's that important. So
Sure.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next up, I've got the mayor of Bullhead City here, Jack Hakem.
Madam Chairperson, Supervisors, Mr. Hendricks, staff, and those here, what a great session. And I thank you for putting this all together, and Mr. Jacks. Mr. Hendricks, I was terribly impressed with your comments, and I certainly appreciated when you came down to the city to visit with us. You know what? I'm not going to get into everything because I believe everything has been said, and there's a lot of people that want to address this. What I want to do is just bring this up, and then I'll pose my question to Mr. Jacks. Jim Matthews, a columnist with Outdoor News Service, leads off with a banner headline that read, "Feds End 50-Year Old Trout Stocking Program from Willow Beach Hatchery." That was on December the 8th, 2013. He writes, "The second massive rainbow trout die-off in the past 4 months at Willow Beach National Fish Hatchery on the Colorado River 11 miles downstream from Hoover Dam has sealed the deal." Now, I don't know what sealed the deal means, but let's go on. On Monday, December the 9th, 2013, we received a call and an email from Rusty Braun, owner of the Riviera Marina on the Colorado River in Bullhead City, who shared a number of his concerns with me. One that truly stood out was this: "I do not understand how this happened and why wasn't there any warning or a plan in place to get this fixed after the incident occurred in August." That really stuck with me. 60,000 trout just dying off. Pipes that don't go as deep as they should. Okay, you have the Las Vegas Water Authority that's putting in fresh water from Lake Mead that they can put out there on these two huge tube tunnel-like pipes, and you can't even put in a 12-inch pipe to keep them alive, and that's going to run $250,000 or $30,000. I just don't get it. Regardless, I sent a letter on the 9th of December to Senator McCain, Congressman Gosar, Senator Flake, all of our state officials, the governor, the Arizona State Game and Fish, and everyone else. I was really angry. Senator McCain responded quickly with a letter dated December 18th to Dan Ash, the director, and you received a copy of that. I know, we had a conversation, requesting clarification to terminate the 50-year-old sport fishing program at Willow Beach. Congressman Gosar's office followed suit, and now I'm so pleased to hear Congressman Heck involved in this. because this isn't just about Bullhead City. This is about our economy, and it has a significant economic problem for us. The bureaucrats in D.C. never said a word about their plan to shut down the trout hatchery. And to my understanding, from news releases in August of 2013, did not attempt to make the necessary repairs, knowing full well there were problems in the loss of 60,000 trout. So, my friends, collectively, we must push back. And that's what we are doing now. We are pushing back and saying, you should have gave us the courtesy of letting us know what was coming down the pike instead of throwing a fast one on us. And that's not the way it should be. 50 years. 50 years. So it just angered me. And when I heard your response that we may open in 18 months, my heart lifted up because my first impression was, never going to happen. This is it, the sequester. And your new information publication that came out for 2013 said that our particular area, Willow Beach, is number 5 on the priority list. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I'm going to hold the word that this hatchery will be open in 18 months, but hopefully sooner. We got a lot of anglers out there that are angry. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got word that a representative from Senator McCain's office is here. Keith, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Steigelbauer? Rick Steigelbauer. Say that again? Rick Steigelbauer. Okay. Well, thank you for coming.
All right, close enough. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much to the board. This is an incredibly important special meeting, and I really appreciate your leadership on this issue. And I'm not going to take too much time. I just wanted to make a couple key points. Penny, thank you very much. Keith, thank you for coming down for this as well. On the letter that's going on right now, Senator McCain's working on the Senate side, and it's extremely important that we encourage the rest of our delegation in Arizona, the rest of the delegation in Nevada, as well as New Mexico, potentially through NACO or through any other means possible to get involved with that letter. The snowstorm has slowed down the letter a bit, which is probably a good thing for us to be able to gain a little bit more support and a little more traction on this. So if there's any way possible for you to reach out to NACO, possibly through ACO, or any of the other organizations that might be national organizations that you all are associated with, to encourage other members of the delegations to get on board with this effort, it could be very beneficial. So once again, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you very much. And our Supervisor Johnson, he is the president of ACO, and he and I will be in Washington, D.C. at the end of this month, beginning of next month, and I'm sure we will be speaking about this at length to the congregation from Arizona and others. So thank you again for reminding us and pushing us to do that. Okay, next up, we have, let's get someone from Laughlin. Connie Davis from the Laughlin Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning, Supervisor and Chairman. Connie Davis, Executive Director of the Laughlin Chamber. I am here in support of the BOS Resolution 214017. Of course, we all know that Laughlin is a huge tourism community, and this would highly affect our businesses, our economic development, and tourism. We have a beautiful new Colorado River Greenway Trails project that was built with fishing nodes for our tourists and our residents, and we need to make sure that that stays viable. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. At this time, I received a couple of letters in support of the resolution. The first is from the City of Boulder City. The Willow Beach area is this letter will serve as the City of Boulder City's support to Save the Willow Beach Hatcheries Rainbow Trout Stocking Program. The Willow Beach area is a popular sport and recreational fishing area enjoyed by many of our residents. The impact of eliminating this program would be far-reaching. Not only would it take away a generational sport and recreational activity for our citizens, the potential ecological, financial, and recreational impact could be devastating for Colorado River communities and tribal neighbors. We urge the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to continue this vitally important program. And that is signed J. David Frazier, the city manager of Boulder City. Next, I received a letter from Carolyn Goodman, the mayor of Las Vegas, signed in conjunction with Stephen Ross, the city councilman from Ward 6. It thanks us for sending us the information. Unfortunately, we are unable to send City of Las Vegas representation to the meeting, but we would like this letter to serve as a formal response in opposition to this decision made by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. As you know, sport fishing is not only a great recreational opportunity for residents in both of our states, but it provides a significant tourism opportunities for local communities along the Colorado River. We hope that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will reconsider their decision in this matter, and I will send both these letters to your office as well. All right, my friend here, Barry Weller from Apache County. Would you like to say something?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I first want to commend you for having a wonderful meeting, which is very informative. I did come over here, first of all, to learn a little bit more about it, and the detail you've gone into and the intricacies of this issue are very interesting to me. I look forward to getting some of the financial data that you all have been espousing here. And I commend your staff greatly for the detailed technical review of the issue and potential aspects of that you have reviewed. Obviously, all the information is not in, but I commend your staff for what they've done and what they presented here. I found it very interesting. Ironically, I was at a meeting last night in my county. I'm District 3 Supervisor for Apache County with the Arizona Game and Fish, talking about trout stocking the lakes and the streams of our White Mountain area. I can't say that it was any much more uplifting than this meeting was, but it did express to me, as you are stating, the vast importance of the economic impact of the sport fishing industry in this state. And I'm here to show my support for your opposition to the closure and express my complete support in all those aspects. I did not expect to actually come up with a possible solution, but I did while I was sitting here listening to your presentations. There is multi-million dollars being spent by the Endangered Species Act to introduce the Mexican gray wolf in my county. With absolutely no economic value to it. And we'd be glad to relinquish that for a year or two while you get your fish hatchery fixed.
Barry, thank you very much. Barry, thank you very much for your comments. I've been waiting all morning to keep this animal in the box, so thank you.
You bet. But a note of seriousness, too, to your staff. You've kind of talked around this, and several people have mentioned it. I find it fascinating that it takes us years, and Arizona Game and Fish actually mentioned the fact that they have some compliance issues before they can put a fish in your stream. I find it's fascinating that it takes us years to go through a NEPA process to address some issues that are very obviously important to our economies and our citizens, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife can decide to shut down without even communicating or going through any NEPA process on a major economic impact and environmental impact to our state. So I hope that we're going to continue to look at that, and we stand with you to look into those issues about the inappropriateness of that action. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Weller, and thank you for traveling so far to be here with us today. You know, at this point, we have so many of the public signed up to speak, and I'm thinking that some of their questions and comments have been already addressed. Members from the public, we would like you to keep your comments down to 3 minutes. That's our call to public. That is our the amount of time we give to call to public. And as the wife of a fisherman, my husband was a commercial fisherman, I know how you guys are passionate about your fishing. And I'm with you, you know. On a personal note, I moved here, my husband and I moved here to this area about 8 years ago because of the fishing. We were blessed enough to be able to live on the Colorado River, and we've seen that river, the fish, the stocking of the fish and the amount of fish just lessen year by year, and it's been very troubling. So when this came aboard, so you understand sort of where I'm coming from as the new chairman of the board, this was a very, very important to us personally and to the families in Mohave County, as well as the economy and business and everything. It's just all things wrapped up in one. So with that, I'm going to just call a couple of people who have signed up and say what you want to say. I have Larry Poplin. Is there a Larry Poplin here from Golden Valley? Okay, we lost him. Tim Island? No, I'm going to pass. You're going to pass? Okay. But thank you for coming. Dwayne Jeka? Hello.
I don't know how to address everybody, but
If you can just state your name real quick
I'm
for the
Dwayne
record.
Jecka. I live 1816 Riverside Drive in Mohead City. I live right across the street from the river, and it does emotionally take a toll on me, too, because of my kids and what they want to do. I moved here about a year ago myself, and I think that you guys are going to be able to work something out. That's what I'm seeing here today, that it can be worked out. The question I have is, how long will it take for the rainbows to be gone if we don't restock? Does anybody know that? Before they're all gone. I mean, I know that's kind of impossible to talk about or even guess, but
I can tell you,
a year, would 2 years, would they all be fished out?
they get fished out very quickly. They'll disappear in a hurry. I mean, they get fished out within a matter of
So then the
weeks.
stripers and the bass will eat the chubs and the bonetail.
The rainbow trout, I mean, based on information that we have in Arizona Game and Fish reports that within a matter of weeks, most of those fish are caught.
You know, Rusty Braun from the marina, is he still here? You know, we heard from Rusty early on, Mayor and I, and thank you. And we'll talk to Larry Adams. He was another one who early on saw this coming and said, you know, we got to do something. So take it away, Rusty. You just say your name, please. And
yeah, Rusty Brown, and thank you, Chairman, Supervisors, Stuart Jacks, and our representative from Game and Fish. Most of the stuff I have to say has already pretty much been said there, but I just have to, we have a passion on it. We've had $1 invested by the federal government equals $24 to $33 back. You knew this one. Youth programs are affected by this. Social family outings, senior citizens, out-of-state anglers, and special needs anglers, kids that can't really catch a fish. It's their first fish. Financial losses, bait, tackle, beer, ice, food, clothing, and fuel. All these things go along with it, but more. New fishing piers have been built. Willow Beach Hatchery's got a new one. Riverside Dock has done theirs over there, the new launch ramp they've built. Nature Trails, Nature Center both promote fishing done over there at Dove on the Nevada side. Davis Camp, they charge entry fees to get in. They've lost these fees because their stocking has stopped. The predators, they've mentioned, they're striper, great blue herons, mergansers, two types, hooded and common, full-breasted, cormorant and osprey, all feed on these, land the grebes also. Invasive species, the mussels and crawdads, the trout are eating these things. They're coming in, the anglers are bringing these in with pieces of crawdads in them and the little shells off of the mussels. The fishing license and tax and the trout stamps, taxes on tackle, Game and Fish has been affected immensely on this one. I think Walmart was down over 100 fishing licenses for this month this year alone. The state license for fishing is down. Share the fish. We didn't kill them fish. We're part of the state also. There is a lot of fish here. They can share a little bit out of each one if you had to. 100 fish from them other guys. The trout were already a budgeted item up there, so they could be purchased from someplace. The funds just need to be reallocated to accommodate immediate stocking. And we found a hatchery that can provide fish. It's in Colorado, is one that they're already working with Game and Fish to provide fish into Phoenix area. It was called Community Lakes. It's now, or is called Community Lakes now. It used to be an urban lake program to encompass more lake stockings. An endangered species has one chance to 6 months in their habitat to make it. After 6 months, they sit there as out of all the fish that they chance. And the trout are gone, and the trout right now, apparently they're still stocking trout to the tribes. So that's pretty much all I can say. I mean, we're losing a lot of tourist incomes and all that there. I hope, and you guys, thank you for bearing with me, both of you.
Thank you, Rusty. Thank you very much.
Chairman.
Is there something else?
If I may, yes, I just got a telephone call from Bob Riley at the Industrial Air Park here in Kingman, Arizona. We have a company here in Kingman by the name of JM Eagle that is a producer of pipe of rather large diameters. And Mr. Henning, the local manager of this company, would like to receive from us a request, and he believes that his company might be very interested in helping solving this problem.
Wow. Thank you. Okay, so we'll work together and make that happen, make that connection. Thank you. Okay, Larry Adams, would you like to say something?
Madam Chairman, Supervisors, I'm Larry Adams from Bullhead City. The supervisors, and particularly the county administrators, stole most of my thunder.
That's hard.
Skillfully and eloquently stole my thunder, but I'd like to highlight a couple of points. A job well done, folks. First of all, I think it's important to note that this crisis was caused by a lack of planning on somebody's part. They lowered the lake, and it killed our fish. Somebody needs to be held accountable for that. The fact that the pipe became dysfunctional in August was a legitimate emergency, and I can't believe that somewhere in U.S. Fish and Wildlife budget there isn't money allocated in a contingency fund to deal with genuine emergencies, and this certainly was. So somebody really fouled up. This wasn't a natural occurrence, it was man-caused. They lowered the lake to benefit endangered species, and they killed all the trout. The other thing I've heard here today that upsets me tremendously, that without the knowledge of the general public, at least my knowledge, and I try to stay abreast of it, this program has been reduced by 2/3, from 250,000 fish a year to 100,000. That's a 2/3 drop in a program that we weren't aware of. There are lots of ways to keep this hatchery open, and there are lots of options for this hatchery, but one of the options is not to close it. This hatchery is not going to close. No. Do we need to broaden the base and have more partners and participation? Probably, and that's a discussion for somewhere down the road. Another consideration is I've heard the number of 25 million that has been expended on this hatchery in the last 10 years. I don't know that to be a fact. Can anybody confirm that?
I think you may be talking about the renovation of the Willow Beach Marina.
Okay. The public has just invested $25 million into this facility, and by golly, it's not going to close. Do we need to broaden the base? Maybe. But this particular crisis was man-caused by darn poor planning, and somebody needs to be held accountable for that, and there should be emergency money to take care of a legitimate emergency somewhere in that federal budget, and that needs to be utilized in this facility up and operating very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Lisa McCabe from the Bullhead Regional Economic Development Authority. Association? Authority. Brita.
Yes. Good morning. Yes, I am Lisa McKay, President of Bullhead Regional Economic Development Authority, as Chairman Angus pointed out, known as BREDA. Our membership's comprised of community leaders and elected officials with a passion for developing our region to its fullest potential. This is a severe economic impact to our entire area. Many people today have referenced the multi-million-dollar impacts, but I wanted to bring it down to a local level. When the issue was first brought to my attention several weeks ago by one of my concerned board members, I conducted a phone survey of our local businesses to try and find out if they had a feel of what impact it had. And I spoke with the sporting goods manager from our local Walmart store, and yes, their fishing licenses alone are down, sales are down 22% from the last season. And furthermore, he explained to me that he is facing a critical mass of customer service issues because his customers are demanding that Walmart discount the fishing licenses because they're no longer allowed to catch the trout. And Walmart can't do that because Fish and Game charges what they charge for a fishing license. So the board and directors of the BREDA have motioned to support the resolution before you today and urge you to take action to protect our local businesses as well as tourism in our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. You know, we have a bunch of anglers who drove all the way from Henderson, and I'm looking for you. Does anybody want to come up and say something? No? You like what you heard today? You want to say something? Okay, come up.
I came down here, I wanted to, my name's Hawkeye, I wanted to complain and bitch, but everything's been said. So I just want to thank you, because called the federal government out on the carpet, and we all appreciate it, so thanks.
Well, thank you, and travel safely back. All right, Toby Cotter from Bullitt City, would you like to say something, or are you in a listening mode? Okay, great. How about our supervisor from La Paz County, King Clapperton? Again, thanks for taking the trip down here, over here.
Good morning, or what's left of it, honorable board, Madam Chair, staff. Thank you very much for everything that you've all done and are continuing to do on behalf of our angling population in the state of Arizona, along the Colorado River especially right now. My name is King Clapperton. I am the District 2 Supervisor for La Paz County. And it's my understanding that one of the intake pipes to the hatchery is clogged with quagga mussels. This, I contend, did not happen overnight. For example, a responsible homeowner with a wood stove periodically cleans the stovepipes of creosote buildup, thereby reducing the possibility of a devastating and potentially fatal fire. Fail to clean that pipe, for example, implies negligence. It's my personal considered opinion that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at Willow Beach may have been negligent in monitoring the intake pipes, at least on a quarterly basis, thereby allowing the gradual buildup of not only mussels, but the severe damage created by corrosion. With that, I submit that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife be held entirely and financially responsible, not the state of Arizona. I have read and familiarized myself with resolution number 2014-017 on behalf of the past, present, and future anglers and the general citizenry of La Paz County District 2. I would like to enter into the permanent record of Mohave County that I am in complete support of Mohave County Board of Supervisors Resolution 2014-017. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have quite a lot of paper here, and it seems like some people have decided not to speak. So what I'm going to do, instead of going through all of this, I'm just going to ask anybody from the audience who wishes to say something, raise your hand. Okay, we still do. We'll start with this gentleman here.
Good morning, Chairman Angus and board and staff. My name is Don Martin. I live here in Kingman. I've been in Mohave County since 1972. Fished Willow Beach many, many years. I'm a licensed fishing guide and sort of an activist, I guess you could say. I have a couple questions for Mr. Jackson, but I also have a statement. Has anybody checked the enabling legislation that was done when Willow Beach was created? My understanding from talking with a Fish and Wildlife Service employee is that when those enabling legislations were done, it, in many cases, and he said he wasn't sure about Willow Beach, but in many cases, it mandates that as part of the mitigation methods for building dams, that they had to support fishing. If that is the case in Willow Beach, you got them by the okay? Because if they're required by that enabling legislation, then they have to continue this program. And again, it's not just with us, the public. They also have a contract with the tribes down the river to support their fishing and stock their fishing facilities too. So it's not just the general public, it's the tribal people also. Many years ago, when I was government liaison for the Sportsman Club, the Lake Mead National Recreation Area came to us and asked our club, which is the largest in Mohave County, to support the rebuilding of the dock at Willow Beach, understanding that that was a critical facility down there for sport anglers, not only in Arizona, but in Nevada too. The Mohave Sportsman Club, and I wrote the document on that, so I know that we wholeheartedly supported that, understanding that sport fishing would continue, and especially trout fishing in that area. So we have a very much vested interest in this thing. You know, as I sit here today and I listen to this, and I think it's going to go somewhere, but I think something we got to realize is this is not a quick fix. Somebody told me that if we handed Fish and Wildlife $2.5 million today, when would be the first fish that we could expect back in the river? Mr. Jacks, do you have an answer for that?
A couple of things. One, your first question about Willow Beach as a mitigation hatchery. I can't speak from the legal standpoint by any means, but there was several years ago clarifying what hatcheries within the Fish and Wildlife Service were classified as mitigation facilities to do just what you said, and Willow Beach was determined that it did not at that time. So I can't speak of that because we had pursued that for that very reason that you spoke of. If we were to answer your second question, to look at if funding was provided, I can't tell you how long it would take to get the facility repaired, if we replace the pipeline or whatever it took to get us back in operations. But when we were looking at being able to have fish stocking again, it would take us a lag time. Typically, if we're starting from eggs, it's 18 months, but I think that we could look at instead of starting from the egg stage, we might be able to find fish that were at the subcatchable stage, and so that might be something that we might be able to get to in 6 months of, say, completion of the project. I don't know if, Mark, if that sounds like a reasonable time. So 6 months from completion of the repair work.
But we're not even starting the repair work, and what I'm thinking is that the economic impact that's been demonstrated, it's huge, it's tremendous. I attended a meeting yesterday in Boulder City with the Lake Mead National Recreation Area, and it was specifically dealt with the fishing guides on the recreation area. One fishing guide from Nevada told me that with the loss of the trout fishery, his niche wintertime guiding activities has cost him $5,000. That's what he makes in the winter when he's not fishing for striped bass on Lake Mead. So it's a real effect on fishing guides. I don't guide there, I guide on Mead. So this isn't a direct impact on me, but it is an impact on people in the sport fishing industry, including guides. So, and the other question I had, just to solidify a statement, it was said that the reason the river was artificially lowered was because of a request from Fish and Wildlife Service to lower it so they could harvest T&E species downriver in Lake Mohave. So was that not information given to the hatchery people so that they knew this was coming?
I'm not sure what information was provided. I know that the water level is low typically that time of year, and all the purposes, I'm not sure. I think it has to do with water delivery. I can't speak to that, but I don't know if there was any specific information provided to our hatchery staff or not.
But it was stated that Fish and Wildlife Service requested BOR to reduce the flows. So if Fish and Wildlife is going to harvest T&E downstream in Mohave, why in the world wouldn't you tell the lake or the Willow Beach people, hey, you're going to get a reduced water flow, you better get ready for it, it's coming?
Yeah, there was obviously a non-communication going on. I think we
Okay.
established that early on.
All right. Well, like I say, I appreciate you guys coming, and I know it's a tough thing, and I hope you get going, but I'll bet you this county is going to lose millions and millions of dollars before we ever see another trout in the Colorado River. Thank you.
Well, I hope that's not true, but thank you for coming up and
You
speaking.
bet.
All right, we have Jackie Mohave. I'm sorry for mispronouncing yet another name.
It's okay, Bocath.
Okay.
My name is Jackie Bocath. I am the Assistant General Manager of the Regency Casino in Laughlin, but I'm not here for that. I'm also on the Board of Directors for the Laughlin Chamber. I'm here because I'm a mother, a grandmother, and an aunt to probably 60 children in a very large family who have been fishing on this river since I was 7, and I'm 57 this year. It makes a big impact on the memories, the angling memories of our family. And it's emotional for me because we've been doing it for so long. Every summer, every week, since I was a small child. My father's 84 years old and still fishes this river. And when I told him that no trout were coming, he said he's not coming back. For an 84-year-old man to give up his angling rights to a place that he has provided major impact and economic support to since I was 7 years old is amazing. And if somebody doesn't do something about it, it's not just my family that's going to be affected. It's a lot of families. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, if we can raise your hands again. You want to say something, Travis? Really? Oh, okay, yeah, I can't, yeah, why don't you come up? I'll never see that hand again.
Well, my name is Mark Daly, and Madam Chairman and members of the board, a couple of whom are friends. I fished in the Colorado River for 30 years. When I moved here from Chicago, I was the president of a trucking company. I ran one, drove them, maintained them, and I can tell you with certainty, there's a phrase called Murphy's Law. If it can break, it will. No doubt. The problem with that hatchery didn't start just last August. It started in, what was it, 1963, I heard? I can tell you for certainty, for 30 years, it's been going on. Years ago, about 8 or 10 years ago, I used to dive around there, scuba dive. I can tell you exactly where those pipes are. You can't tell me that you didn't know that there was going to be a problem. They did nothing. I've seen the races that he was talking about. Half of that hatchery is put together with bubble gum and baling wire if you go around looking at it. Why? Why was not this place maintained? You knew it was going to happen. Any kid with a 4th grade education would know, because it's utilized every day and it's been there for 50 years, something was going to happen. Why didn't they maintain it? That's my question. That's what I'd like to know. Mr. Jackson?
Your point's well taken, and you are exactly right. As soon as you started the facility, you start have to maintaining, and that's been our biggest problem, is that we have not had the maintenance funds for that hatchery and many of our other hatcheries to maintain them adequately, and now we're starting to reap those decades of lack of maintenance to our facilities, because this isn't the only one. I mean, we had the same situation a couple of years ago at Alchesay Williams Creek with their pipeline. because of the aging process. And so we recognize that, and we hear it from our hatchery managers across our region. We've got to fix this, and it's not just the facilities, it's the buildings, it's the quarters, it's everything, and we just haven't had the budget to address these maintenance.
They just got done building that check station when you come in there. They've never, ever used it. My contention is, why weren't they maintaining the hatchery when they were blowing money on all this other stuff that they're not even using? They have no reason to use it now because nobody with a boat, including me, is going to go there if you can't catch any fish. I'm not going to take my grandson there to go fishing if he can't catch any fish. Why were they blowing money on all this other stuff first and leaving the hatchery to just deteriorate, just fall apart around itself? Those pipes have been bad for years. I can tell you 10 years ago they were bad.
Okay.
And it doesn't take a rocket scientist.
Okay, let's, if you want to just answer, and then we must move along. We understand, you know, obviously mistakes were made.
I got my
We wish
point
that
across.
everything
Thanks.
in the perfect world, but we are where we are. I understand everyone's frustration. I'm sure Mr. Jacks does too. But do you want to respond to that last comment?
Just to clarify on some of those parts that you brought up, that's not within the responsibility of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's a different agency, and I can't speak to why they chose to work what they want to. They are another federal agency, but it's not the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Who is the agency?
We're only responsible for the hatchery itself. I'm not sure, but I would think that part of that would be within the National Park Service.
Oh, no, okay.
But we don't make any determination on their projects, just on the hatchery itself.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next. Yes, sir? No, 1 second. I want to get someone from the audience before we get.
Craig Vallon, Mohave, I'm Mohave Valley, Bullhead City. Thank you for this opportunity, and you've done an excellent job in providing the public with information. Just a few points. The survey that you've made mention of so many times today, the National Fish Hatchery System of March 2013, inside of it, it's very enlightening. It's 34 pages long. It's worth reading if you have some time to kill. But inside of there, one of the main statements I thought was interesting was the EPA states, no agency will take any action that further endangers an endangered species. And by removing the trout from this system, which is artificially created anyway, that's exactly what they do, because they're going to increase the predation on all of the native species. Because lots of predators, not just fish, but birds of all species eat trout. It happens all the time, and every one of those birds that can't find a trout to eat is going to eat whatever it can get its beak around. And then so are the striped bass, and so are the flathead catfish, and et cetera, et cetera. I attended a crabs meeting, which is not what it sounds like, is the Colorado River Aquatic Biologist meeting at one of the casinos here about a month ago, which most of the fish and game from the local, federal, and state agencies were at. I watched their presentations, and they covered, the information they covered there was the programs that they work on to reintroduce the native species. It's dismal. You need to attend those if you want some a real education. Less than 1%, way less than 1% of every native species that's planted from Boulder Dam to Mexico has like a 6-month survival ratio. And none of them that I could find out are even reproducing. Not one single one of them is even reproducing, and we're talking about eliminating a recreational fishing that produces millions of dollars for every state where it's happening. I know I've got some more to say, but right now I'd just like to say one last thing and I'll get out of here. Crothers Fish Farm in Colorado, I've been in contact with him. He's quoted me a price for 10 to 12-inch trout, which is a 1-pound trout, at $2.35 each. And he'll negotiate that. And he delivers, he has all the permits necessary. He delivers to Arizona as we speak and to Mount Charleston in Nevada. And he stocks trout there. And he will arrange our deliveries with other deliveries to cut the cost of transportation. And he wants the business bad.
Okay, thank you very much. If you'll share the information you have with our county administrator, I'd appreciate it. Is David McDaniel here? I think I just saw him walk out. I hope he didn't leave. Okay. Next up, I know Travis has been. Travis, you sure? Yeah, whenever you're ready. Okay.
Chairman, Supervisors. Mr. Jacks, thank you for joining us today. I'm Travis Lingenfelter, Legislative Liaison Special Projects for Mohave County. We've actually communicated over email at least a couple times. Just to further my own research on this issue, I have just a few clarification questions for you, if that's all right. You mentioned the many hatcheries in the United States. I'm not sure what the exact number of those are, but there's a distinction. There's only a handful of mitigation hatcheries, and I'm not sure if you know the exact number of mitigation hatcheries in the United States.
I don't know the exact number. Most of our mitigation hatcheries are either in the southeast region of the country or up in the Rocky Mountain region. Mark, do you happen to know how many? Yeah.
Okay.
And most of those are through Tennessee Valley Authority or Corps of Engineer mitigation projects.
Great. Thank you. My next question would be, could you explain the distinction between a mitigation hatchery and a non-mitigation hatchery?
Not from a legal standpoint, because I think there are a lot of nuances, but the mitigation hatcheries have to do with when there were water projects put in like dams, and then because of the subsequent loss of recreational opportunities, that then in some cases a hatchery was constructed and built to provide fish to mitigate for those, and that's in non-legal terms. So to distinguish between what are covered within our agency as a mitigation facility and is not, I can't tell you all the nuances of that. That's beyond me.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's been mentioned before, the memorandum of understanding that was entered into in April of 1959, and that was between Fish and Wildlife, the National Park Service, and the Bureau of Reclamation. In the memo itself, it says that it was solely for the mitigation, it was a mitigation hatchery solely for the propagation of trout and to mitigate recreational losses resulting from federal dam construction of the Hoover Dam project. I actually spoke to another lady, and forgive me, I don't have her name, but I have an email from her, and I'll make sure that I get that to the administrator. Administrator within the U.S. Fish and Game that told me that that MOU is actually still in effect. And so with that, if it is actually in effect, do you believe, and I know that none of us are lawyers here, that the service would still be obligated to continue fulfilling the original mitigation purpose that was outlined in that memo, Andrew?
I can't really answer that question for sure. What I can do is to find the documentation and find out why Willow Beach was not included in the list of hatcheries that were classified as mitigation, because that was a big issue when that was done. It was over a decade ago, and see what I can find for that information and provide that to Chairman Angus and to whoever else needs it. I'm not exactly sure why it was not included.
Thank you, sir. Just one last point, if I may. The first die-off of the trout was in August of 13, is that correct?
Yes.
August, okay. In my research, I actually found it was reported that in May of 2013, the service expended a sum of $472,150 in an attempt to train the bony-tailed chub and the razorback sucker to recognize and avoid predators. Was that action in recognition of the impact of maybe the eventual removal of the trout? I mean, if it's a policy direction?
That's not, that project was not part of, it didn't have anything to do, was no relation to the situation with the rainbow trout. That was part of the project, some of those that were funded as part of the MSC, the Multi-Species Conservation Program, funding dollars for research.
Great. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
My name's Tom Doherty. I live in Golden Shores. Supervisor Agnes said that we are not going to stand for the shutdown of the trout hatchery. Guess what? All the communities along the river, including Bullhead City, Lake Havasu City, and even my small community in Golden Shores, have helped to convert half of this trout hatchery into an endangered fish hatchery. The $2 million plus spent on the hatchery to convert the hatchery did not just come from our taxes. We contributed money from our drinking water districts. We all contributed money to the Multi-Species Conservation Program. This is a group that's providing funds to continue the hatchery as an endangered fish hatchery, and we are helping to fund them. Who is the MSCP? They are a federal agency within several other federal agencies, including the Bureau of Reclamation and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. They are slated to spend $800 million, that's $800 million, on endangered species on the lower Colorado River over the next 40 years. This group has taken over large areas of public land, water, and eliminated public access. It is easy to see this group has no interest in trout fishing on the Colorado. They could care less about the economic impact to our communities. I believe they look at trout stripers as invasive species, and they should be removed from the Colorado River. If we continue to allow U.S. Fish and Wildlife to dictate where wolves and razorback suckers are going to be in our county, our way of life on the river will forever be changed. I would recommend that this board take immediate action to shift state and local funding from the MSCP to the trout hatchery and other projects that benefit Arizona citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you repeat your name, please?
Tom Doherty.
Tom Gordy?
Doherty.
Doherty. Oh, I know you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Next.
Madam Chairman and Board of Supervisors, my name is Jim Berg. I live in Bullhead City. I've been there 13 years. I retired from teaching about 6 months ago. I waited for 13 years to really have some time to fish. I'm very impressed what research was done here and the possible solutions. I do have a suggestion of what no one's considered, and that's a plan B. What if we don't get more trout? What if the government says no more money or whatever? Or even if we get the trout, what if we have to wait 18 months or 2 years before they're big enough for us to catch them? My suggestion on plan B is maybe we might, even just a citizens group might be able to do this, start talking about some type of habitat. They spent a lot of money down in Havasu, and they have wonderful fishing down there. You don't have to plant any trout down there. You have all kinds of great sports fishing because there's underwater habitat. I have a bass boat, flat deck. I would like to volunteer my boat and my time and my fuel to help transport those things out to locations. I don't know what's involved. I know the word compliance issues was mentioned. I don't know if I could do that on my own. I haven't started that. But I think that possibly, even if the trout are brought back, it would benefit everyone on the river here if certain areas had more habitat. I know it really, really, really impacted Lake Havasu. So that's my suggestion. I would like to make an analogy, and that is that what's happening right now with the fishing and the way things are being cut down, it's almost like a forest fire. I have a home and it's in a forest and there's a fire. And I go, wait a minute, I want that fire stopped. And they go, oh no, we have bureaucratic compliances, things, we have shortage of funds. There's reasons why we can't send somebody to stop the fire that might burn your house down. I'd like to see, what would happen then is I would try and get my neighbors to bulldoze the trees around my house, or I'd go out there with a garden hose or whatever I could do to stop it myself. I think as fishermen, we need to have that attitude right now. There is an awful lot of things in the budgets that are going to be real hard to get through. So my time's up. I'd like to end with one statement. I think this probably fits with almost every true fisherman here, and that is that fishing is not a matter of life or death.
it's much more important than that.
Thank you. And I think Chris Cantrell, excuse me, sir? Sir, I think Mr. Cantrell would like to respond to something you said.
I just quickly wanted to note that current habitat projects are being conducted by the state of Arizona and Nevada and Lake Mohave. And our fish program manager, Matt Schmiel, if he can get your contact information, he'd love to have extra volunteers to come out and
I'd really like
help.
to be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you guys will talk after the meeting.
Thank you.
My name's Elmer Davis. I live on the Colorado River. I've been fishing it for many years. I've probably been in the paper at least a dozen times for the big fish that I've caught. Well, now I'm putting them back after I catch them. I was a firm believer, eat what you catch. If you don't want to eat it, then give it to somebody who wants to eat it. Right now, I'm in the situation where, because I live right on the river, I go out maybe 50 times a day and I check the water, and it's dismal. Although I did catch a 4-pound, 2-ounce trout a month and a half ago, they're still out there. And there's still some young trout that are proliferating, very few. They say that the trout don't proliferate in that river. Well, they could, and they will someday when you get some people that know how to manage the river a little bit better. And trust me on this, ask some old fishermen, they'll tell you. Anybody who's been fishing on this river here and knows how to catch fish, they'll tell you right now that there's still fish out there. I know a guy that goes out there every day and catches stripers. There's still stripers out there. But you know what? If we don't get off our ass, find some funding, he said, what, $2.65 for a pound trout. Let's not wait the 18 months. Let's not wait. I know these guys, and I know they love what they do. Because I've talked to a lot of guys who worked in the fishing this and fishing that, and they're not out there to mess around or screw this up or anything like that. So stay off their butts. You know, he's trying to do a good job. You guys are doing a great job, but we've got to get some funding to get some trout in the river and starting quickly. We can't wait 18 months.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We agree with you. That's why we're all here. Okay, anyone else would like to say something?
I'm Barbara Bodley, a private citizen of and resident of Laughlin. Very proud to have been there for 10 years, but I probably never would have even learned about this area, except that I remembered how much my grandfather loved fishing in the Colorado River in the 1950s. So that was a reason that this seemed like a logical place to look at, to come to and live here. I did have a specific question for Mr. Jacks, if he can answer it. Can you please clarify for me the difference in funding between the threatened and endangered species versus the recreational species, such as the rainbow trout? What is the interconnection between the funding that's available, if any?
There are certain programs within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that are earmarked isn't the right word, that are special allocations for threatened and endangered species recovery, and some are specifically for, in this case, hatchery management. And sometimes we have some discretion. A lot of the time we don't have discretion as to how we can spend our funds. And in the case of Willow Beach, a large portion of our funding for the threatened and endangered species work comes through the MSCP funding through the Bureau of Reclamation. So when it starts with our allocations from the Washington level, it's allocated to each of the different programs within our agency, and that's kind of where it starts.
So someone from Washington gets to make that decision?
Yes.
And is there any consideration as to the economic usefulness of those threatened and endangered species?
I can't answer that question very well. Whenever we were talking about at the Washington level of all the decisions of how they're made and how the allocations go among our 8 regions and then within our regions of the different programs within those regions, I assume that there's consideration made, but how all those decisions are made, that varies from year to year, and I'm not part of that process.
And would it be correct to say that the threatened and endangered species, are they all native fish to this area?
For the work that we're talking about here, yes, those threatened and endangered fish are native to the Colorado River.
So if there is only a finite amount of funding available, then it would be conceivable to say that rainbow trout fish hatcheries can't be funded because the funds are being taken to be used for threatened and endangered species that may have a very limited economic impact.
Yeah, that's, a lot of people have brought it up before of we have responsibilities as an agency and legal mandates for the different parts that we have to do, and that's kind of where we got to that hatchery evaluation, because we're trying to do both, and we don't have enough we don't have the resources to do both to the level that we would like to be able to.
Okay, I'm a firm believer in the value of history, but there are a lot of people that live here now, and it would seem to me that not being able to maintain a suitable fishery in the form of rainbow trout would be equivalent to saying, well, we shouldn't have air conditioning in the desert and we should remove the dams because they didn't exist here before.
That's a point well taken.
Okay, and I want to thank Chairman Angus and all of the officials from Mohave County and the state of Arizona for raising the public awareness of all of us.
Thank you for coming.
Madam Chairman, I did have one question. Since the closure of the hatchery was so abrupt, there must have been funding that was at least allocated to the hatchery and to the purchasing of trout and to propagating that program, at least for this year. What I saw in some of my research is there was a commitment not to close down the hatcheries or consider closing down the hatcheries until like 2015. So that funding must still be out there. And it's my understanding, and I'm not an expert at this, and I have very little knowledge about this, but it's my understanding there was like $46.1 million in funding for the Consolidated Appropriations Act for the hatcheries specifically this year. And has any of that funding, the existing funding that's not being used, not being spent because you shut down the trout hatchery by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the surplus that's being created there, or some of this Appropriations Act funding been considered for actually reestablishing and getting this trout hatchery up and running?
So when you're talking about our 2014 funding, when our year started on October 1 of 2013, they had passed an omnibus bill, but we haven't received our regional allocations for our programs yet. And so whenever we get those funds to our, from a regional standpoint, then we start making those determinations among our different facilities. And so when we're looking at savings, we have to look at it from a regional standpoint, because Willow Beach isn't the only hatchery that we have in our southwest region. So we have to take that into consideration. But looking at what we're going to see, we just haven't gotten it yet, so we don't know what our budgets are yet.
And but you do have an existing budget that you say, that you actually stopped pulling from probably in November, December, January, February. So you've got almost a fourth of a year of savings that you haven't expended for the trout program. I was wondering what's happening with those funds.
So far, we've up to this point, we've been spending off of our continuing resolution amounts, which are a reduced amount, and so we don't know yet what our what our budget will be, so we don't know what the overall savings will be. But you're correct that if we had an original allocation for trout production and we're not producing trout, that there would be some level of savings. I don't know what that amount is yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, before this board goes ahead and votes on this resolution that we discussed 2.5 hours ago, I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to come out here today. Mr. Jacks, Mr. Cantrell, and all the different representatives from all the entities, and the anglers, thank you for coming down, and especially to our wonderful staff who did an incredible job of research and really taking the time to find out the facts, because the facts are what matters. And what I heard today gives me a lot of hope. I heard a bunch of entities, government entities, who are open to ideas, to new ways of doing things, maybe, thinking outside the box a little bit to see if we can all work together. Maybe we could start by putting together a regional task force to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then this gentleman who called in from Kingman, who says he wants to work. So that's the kind of action. That is what I was hoping that this meeting would accomplish, and I think it has. Okay? So with that, I'll entertain a second.
A second the motion.
Okay? All in favor? Well, it was the motion 2.5 hours ago, okay? I'll just to reiterate, we're going to adopt the Board of Supervisor Resolution number 2014-017, opposing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's decision to cease raising trout at the Willow Beach Hatchery and releasing trout into the Colorado River, and authorize the chairman to sign the letter to the Director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and the Secretary of the Interior with copies to the senators and congressional delegations of Arizona, Nevada, and California, open discussions with other states, counties, cities, tribal government, and other affected parties, and engage the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in discussions to reestablish the trout program at the Willow Beach Hatchery. And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Is Supervisor Johnson still on the phone?
Yep.
Okay. So we have a unanimous vote on that. And once more, thank you all very, very much. This meeting's adjourned.
For clarity.